Recording. Boker Tov. Good morning, everybody. I want to begin by explaining the title, which is probably can be understood a lot of different ways. The title I gave was "What Really Happened at Har Sinai," and I'm not questioning if it happened. I'm only questioning that we take for granted for sure. I'm only questioning when I read the Torah, it's very difficult to understand what happened. I'll explain what I mean. Let's say you were a movie producer and the script of the movie was Sefer Shemot. And I wanted to take chapter 19 and 20 of Sefer Shemot, the story of the, what they call in English, the theophany. If I want to take the story of the theophany, what they call, from now on, Maamad Har Sinai in fancy English is called the theophany. If I want to take that story and make a play out of it or produce it, it's very difficult to figure out exactly what happened. Now, it could be because the Torah is poorly written, which obviously is not going to be the case. On the other hand, there's no doubt the Torah writes a story in a way that's very difficult to follow. So the goal of the shir today is to understand the style that the Torah writes the story of Maamad Har Sinai and try to maybe suggest a reason for the ambiguity. Now, I want to give one very important methodological point, which I think I mentioned before, but I want to make sure it's crystal clear. Whenever you study Chumash, our basic assumption, not only the book is from God, but God does not want us to read the book, he wants us to study the book. It's a book to study and not read. I think I proved that many times because many times the message of Chumash comes through its study. The example we always bring is when you study the days of creation, it doesn't say to compare day 1 to day 4, day 2 to 5, and 3 to 6, but there's no doubt when you study it carefully, you can't miss the connection between day 1 and 4. Remember Or and Ma'or, and day 2 and day 5. And where's the sky and the sea, and the birds and the fish. And day 3, the land, and day 6, God making land animals and things like that. There's certain things in Chumash when you study it and analyze it, the way Chumash is written begs interpretation, and many times through its presentation is the primary message. But if you don't do the study, if you don't do what I call objective analysis, you can't get to that interpretation. The problem is when I do objective analysis, that's objective, and I can try to prove that or misprove that. But the question is, how do I know I arrived at the right interpretation? So in general, almost all the great commentators that we study all the time, Rashi, Ramban, everybody, what they do, in a nutshell, they assume you've done the objective analysis and they share with you their subjective interpretation. What I'm going to do with you today is I'm going to walk you through what I call objective analysis when you study the story of the Exodus, trying to figure out what's happening. And in light of that analysis, I'll try to understand the various interpretations that you're all familiar with. And then maybe I'll add something a little bit extra of my own towards the end of this year. So now we're going to get to work. That was a little stall until everyone logged on. And I think we are good now. Okay. So I want everyone, if you have Chumashim at home, I'm going to share my screen in a minute also. I want everyone to open up chapter 19 in Shemot. And the first thing we're going to do, let me share my screen real fast. Because you're not in school, so I'll take it easy on you. I'm going to do the division pretty much on my own. Meaning what? Here. In the first two psukim in chapter 19, I'm going to call them background, or basically arrival at Har Sinai. They don't add that much to the story. They give the reader the setting of where the story is going to happen. It's the third month since we left Egypt. It's been 6 weeks pretty much since we left Egypt, if it's Rosh Chodesh Sivan. And on that day, they arrived in Midbar Sinai. Beforehand, we were in Marah, we were in Midbar, we were in Elim, we were in Midbar Sin, we were in Refidim, and now we get to Midbar Sinai. And remember, we came here because there was no water in Refidim, and Moshe hit the rock at Har Sinai, and now we have a source of water. And therefore, we traveled from Refidim, and we came to Har Sinai, and we camped by the mountain. Okay, we set up camp opposite the mountain where there's water. Now, I'm going to look now in Pasuk Gimel, and we're going to do something a little bit together here. Moshe Allah El Elohim. Moshe goes up to God. Now, Has Moshe ever been here before? Just a quick question to make sure everyone's awake. Has Moshe ever been at this site before?
Yeah.
When was he there?
Yeah, the bush.
That was a burning bush. I want to make sure it's perfectly clear. The burning bush is the first time Moshe came here. And remember, God told Moshe at the burning bush, when you take the people out of Egypt, Tavdun et Elohim al harazeh. You're supposed to serve God on this mountain. And if you follow the story of the Exodus, I think we've done that share before, Moshe's only request from Pharaoh is we want to go a 3-day distance into the desert to serve our God. And now they're doing what they said they would do. They're going a 3-day distance into the desert, to Har Elohim, to this mountain to serve God. Now, let me take off the screen share for a minute. I want to explain something. There's been many times up until now that God has spoken to Moshe. This is not going to be the first time that God speaks to Moshe. And it's also not the first time that God's spoken to Moshe to tell him to tell Am Yisrael to do something. God told Moshe at the burning bush, tell Am Yisrael, I'm coming to redeem you. God told Moshe, tell Bnei Yisrael to bring Korban Pesach, to sprinkle the blood. God tells Moshe, tell the people to travel. This is not going to be the first time that God's talking to Moshe. It's also not going to be the first time that God's talking to Moshe to tell Bnei Yisrael something. But something unique is going to happen, which I want you to pay attention to in the next set of psukim. So let's take a look carefully. And I'm going to use what I wanted to call, I guess I can't annotate. I'll check real fast. Okay, I'll have to do it. We'll have to do it on our own. Moshe goes up to God. Vayikra elav Hashem min hahar lemor, ko tomar lebeit Yaakov v'taged livnei Yisrael. Let me take out this one and I'll annotate here. We're in this sentence. We're a small group today, so we can participate a little bit. Where do I need a quotation mark in this sentence? Right. Moshe goes up to God, and God calls him from the mountain saying, Ko tomar lebeit Yaakov. Where do I put my first quotation mark?
Tomar.
Right before Ko tomar, right here. Right at this point, right here is where I put my first quotation mark before the word Ko. Agreed? Now, but I need another quotation mark over here, correct? One quotation mark starts here, Ko tomar lebeit Yaakov, okay? And then another quotation mark where what he needs to say to Bnei Yisrael. God's telling Moshe Rabbeinu, tell this to Bnei Yisrael. At 10:10. Now, where do I close the quotation mark that begins with Pasuk Daled? That's why I want you to look carefully. The quotation mark that begins with Pasuk Daled. Where do I end the quote of what Moshe has to tell the people in the name of God? Where would that be?
After the Goy Kadosh.
After the Goy Kadosh. That ends over here. Agreed? In other words, from here to here, I'm sorry, I don't have a line there. From here to here is what God tells Bnei Yisrael. And then where I close the quotation mark that began with the word Ko, over here, Ele Torah Asher Tedaber Bnei Yisrael. Agreed? Yeah. That's what we need to do. Now, this format we've never seen before. Let me give you an example. Let me close this share. Let me stop this. Just open up a regular Chumash. If I go back to the burning bush, there's lots of examples of that there. Let's take a Chumash and go to Sefer Shmot. Okay? In Sefer Shmot, Perek Gimel, God's going to tell Moshe to talk to, here, Perek Gimel and Shmot. God's going to tell Moshe, let's take Pasuk Tetvav here. V'yomer Elohim, here. Okay. He says, Lech v'asafta et ziknei Yisrael v'amarta lehem, Hashem Elokei avotechem nirei elai. Okay. And then Ubata and go tell Ziknei Yisrael and go tell Mitzrayim and tell him this. What happens over and over again? Let's take Perek Yud Bet. God tells Moshe, Daber b'nei Yisrael, Dabru HaKodah b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lehem, and tell them, take Korban Pesach and things like that. And then Moshe actually goes and does it later on. So in light of that, look at this format and tell me what's special about it. What's a bit different about it? Look at this format. I've made it here bigger on this screen. Okay. what happens? This opening line, Kol Tomar LeBeit Yaakov v'Tagid Le'Bnei Israel, that's way more formal than Tagid Le'Bnei Israel. This is a formal opening. That's number one. Number two, this trailer at the end is also unique. We've never had that before. I hope that's clear. In other words, Moshe many times has been told by God, tell something to Bnei Israel, but the manner in which he's being told to tell them is much more formal. Kol Tomar LeBeit Yaakov v'Tagid Le'Bnei Israel. Quote, and then after the quote, Elad v'Masher Tedaber Bnei Israel. What's happening here, this is going to be a very formal type of conveying of a message to Am Yisrael. And inside this quote, if I undo this and I take a look just at what's inside the quote, if I take this alone, notice that God wants Moshe to speak to the people in first person representing God. Notice? God's telling Moshe, speak in first person. Moshe is talking on behalf of God. Look what I did to Egypt. Okay? That's referring to God. In other words, look how many times they have the word li. We have, let me take all that off. We have here, don't we? What's being highlighted here, the koli, it briti. God's saying,
Kili.
yeah, kili kol aretz, kili kol aretz. Yeah. And therefore, in this section, I wouldn't say that Moshe is talking to Bnei, that God is talking to Moshe. God is talking through Moshe to the Jewish people. And this is something new and very formal. And the first part of the show, I want to understand why. Because in my opinion, these are some of the most important psukim in Chumash. Because this is the preamble to Brit Sinai. What is God telling? Pasuk Dalet is background. Like, look what I did for you. Look what I did to Egypt. I brought you here. And a tremendous way. I guess that's a bit of a metaphor because they walked the whole way. But it's as though I brought you here on the wings of eagles. But that's background, as sort of a motivator. But now here's the conditions. If what? If you are willing to obey me. You have a pretty bad track record still now. Remember? In Refidim, they got angry with God, and Midbar Sin, they complained. They've been complaining the whole way. Now are you willing to obey me? And keep my covenant, I think, has to be something new, what's coming up. Because the Ten Commandments is going to be referred to as a covenant. And then you'll be my skula from all the nations, even though I'll follow Ibn Ezra. Even though I'm the God of all the land. Right? You'll be my special nation. And then, if you accept that responsibility to be my covenantal partner and obey me, okay, then that will make you a mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. That will make you a nation separated in the service of God, a nation serving God. Now, this is more than information. This I'm going to refer to as a proposal. Who can explain to me what makes this a proposition as opposed to information? Just real simple. In the way this is being presented, what makes that a proposition as opposed to information?
If and then.
If then.
It's an if and then, which means it needs confirmation. In theory, what could Am Yisrael say? We're not interested. God didn't say, accept this or I'll put a mountain over your head. The Midrash adds that in. But if I follow the simple reading of the Psukim, God is offering Am Yisrael sort of a deal. Or basically, he's offering them a job. Do you want to work for me forever? You want to be my nation forever? We could say yes, we could say no. One of the reasons why we have this midrashic interpretation of Sayu at Sinai, that everyone stood at Har Sinai, we were all there. The idea is that we make a covenant with God as a people. And when you're born Jewish, you're part of a people. It's not a covenant between 600,000 or however million Jews were there at the time. It's not a covenant between a bunch of individuals and God. It's a covenant between a nation and God. And that's why here it's going to be in this. Remember, by Yichan Yisrael Neged Har, the whole introduction will be in the singular. We're entering as a people to be God's people forever. Why is it important that we could say no? Why in Pshat, we could, if God's making an offer, he's not saying, accept this, otherwise I'll kill you, or I'll destroy things. He's saying, do you want to be my nation or don't want to be my nation? Why is it important? What, Danny?
Bechira.
More than bechira, from a legal point of view.
It's binding.
If it's under coercion, it's not binding. If this is an agreement between God and the people, if it's a binding contract, then it has to be taken. It can't be under coercion. Now, the Midrash is coming to balance that idea and telling you that, it looks like we had a choice. We need to know that we didn't have a choice. Of course we had a choice, but the Midrash didn't say, the mountains over here, I'll kill you. It said, the mountains over here, I'll bring things back to Tov Vavo, meaning like the purpose of creation was to get this to this point. It's a I guess a philosophical insight, but definitely not pshat in the story. Now, I want to go back to this idea of Goy Kadosh, a nation separated for the service of God. Did we ever have that concept in Sefer Bereshit? Did God ever tell Avram you're going to become a Goy Kadosh?
No.
Never, right? But what did it say? What's the first thing God told Avram? V'eschalo Goy Gadol. I'm promising you to be a great nation. But what I want to explain is the goal of becoming God promised Avram, I'm going to make you a nation. I'm going to give you a land to become a nation. And to become that nation, remember we had the covenant of Brit Ben Abtarim, you have to go through suffering in someone else's land. There'll be a long historical process until you become that nation. And there's no doubt that the goal of becoming that nation, the goal of becoming a Goy Gadol is to become a Goy Kadosh. But a Goy Kadosh has to be accepted. A Goy Gadol is something God can do for us. A Goy Kadosh, the goal of God choosing Avram to start a Goy Gadol is to become a Goy Kadosh, but I can't become a Goy Kadosh until I'm a Goy Gadol. So it's sort of a prerequisite. I'll give you the flip side of it. We become a nation in Egypt, but we can't become God's nation when we're under foreign rule. And therefore, the need for Geula, I need to have freedom from Egypt to be able to enter a covenant with God. But just like I need freedom to enter a covenant with God, I also need to be a people to enter a covenant with God as a people. So I need technically to become a Goy Gadol, and we become that in Egypt. But that Goy Gadol has to also become a Goy, has to be free, has to have Geula, has to be redeemed and have independence. And now we're ready to make a covenant with God to be God's people forever. Now, to prove that it's a proposition that has to be ratified, all we need to do is see the next two lines, and we've never seen this before, in that God gave Moshe Rabbeinu. Because what happens next? Moshe brings the proposal. He goes to the elders of the people who are going to relay it to the people. All the things God said. And the people who heard it from their elders come back and they accept it. Whatever God says, we're going to do. And then Moshe returns these words of the people back to God. In other words, Moshe is sort of like the shadchan in between. But I want to point out, there's a certain formality in what's happened here that we've never seen before. And the need for the formality is simply because of the importance of the event. This is the preamble to the covenant, but the covenant is not meaningful unless Am Yisrael willingly accepts it and knows what they're getting into. One last sort of half in jest and half seriously, the rabbis compare this to a wedding. The rabbis compare Har Sinai to a wedding, and basically we're making a commitment to enter a relationship without having any idea what we're getting into. In other words, two parties enter a relationship because they want to be in that relationship, even though they don't know the details yet. The details, they'll play themselves out. But we're offering this, that's why I'm using the word proposition or proposal. Here we're proposing to become, God's making a proposal. Do you want to work for me forever? Do you eternally want to be my partner? And Am Yisrael accepts the proposition even before we get the contract. Now, I want to stop here for a minute and have a short little discussion. How do I stop my share? Here we go. What should happen next? Now that we accepted, okay, we want to be God's people, what should happen next?
Set up a yeshiva.
I would say, listen.
God should tell Moshe, Here's what you hear. Here are the terms of the covenant. Here are the terms of the contract.
Now, I'm going to give you an analogy from summer camp, okay? Let's say some camp director comes, going to yeshiva, whatever it is, and starts looking to recruit counselors for camp. So he gives a whole speech how important camp is and this and that. And then, some, gullible 18, 19-year-old hears the speech and says, okay, you know what? This sounds great. I want to be a counselor at camp. So he hears about this camp, this great idea. It's wonderful. I want to be a counselor. What happens? What needs to happen next? Now that you decide to be a counselor, now you have to have a contract. Camp director goes, who's the camp director? What's your job? I need after I've accepted once I've accepted the proposition to come and work at camp, now I need to sign a contract. But the contract itself is only the basics. Once I arrive at camp, I need to go into, like we call pre-camp, I need to train the counselor how to do his job. If he's a bunk counselor, I need to teach him what the laws of the bunk, how do you take care of what you can't do. If he's working at the pool, if he's a lifeguard, there'll be a set of laws for lifeguards. If he's working in the kitchen, there's a set of laws. And each group needs a set of laws. So I'm saying there's the idea of accepting a job, signing a contract with the basic principles, and then a detailed set of laws of how to get your job done. Hope you follow my analogy. Therefore, this is going to be the preamble, meaning this is going to be, do you want to work for me? The 10 Commandments, what you call the 10 Commandments, is going to be the contract. And then afterwards, we have a whole set of laws of how to get our job done. And lots of other things that go with it. And that'll be, I'm giving it's like a framework of what happens in Chumash. But the next thing that needs to happen is going to be the contract. In theory, what should the next pasuk be? The next pasuk should be the 10 Commandments. Agreed? What I'm expecting next is the contract. And if the next pasuk was, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Tzitecha, Lo Yeh Lecha, remember, the 10 Commandments are called a brit. Remember, they're written on Luchot HaBrit, and they're in the Aron HaBrit. There's no doubt they're covenantal. What makes them a covenant, hopefully I have time to talk about. But for some reason, before God declares the 10 Commandments, we have this really strange set of events, which we're going to read now and try to understand them. And the most difficult verse is going to be the first one. So let's we'll pick up this one first. Okay, we'll read here from here what happens next. In Pasuk Tet. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Hinei anochi ba elecha ba'av ha'anan. Okay, I'm going to come to you in the thickness of a cloud. Ba'avor yishma am b'dabri imach. So that the people will hear, or maybe overhear when I speak to you. V'gam b'cha yaminu lo'olam. Let's stop here for a minute. What is God talking to Moshe about? God has talked to Moshe before, and he's encountered Moshe before. But now he's talking about a certain manner that he's going to talk to Moshe in a cloud, inside the thickness of a cloud. But for what reason? So the people will overhear when he talks to Moshe, and they'll believe in you forever. What I'm assuming here, I'll follow, you'll see this in Chazal in a minute. What I'm assuming here is that God is planning to say the 10 Commandments, but he wants to say the 10 Commandments in a manner that the people will be sure that when Moshe says, here's what God said, he really said it. Because up until now, put it this way, why do the people believe that Moshe is a representative of God? Because of all the miracles they saw in Egypt. They know Moshe exists, that's for sure. Moshe talks to them. They've never seen God. They've perceived God. Remember? Vayiminu b'Hashem Moshe Avdo, Kriyat Yamsuf. Wow. Seeing all the miracles, seeing them on. So they know that God exists. But now God's going to give them a contract. And now comes the biggest challenge, I guess, of religion. Moshe is going to be the lawgiver. How do I know that what Moshe is saying is really coming from God? I call this the challenge of modern orthodoxy, meaning what? If God said it, and I'm sure God said it, I follow. If the rabbis made it up, I pick and choose. You're familiar with that hashkafa?
Yep.
It's very modern. What God wants to give the people a set of laws, but he wants to make sure when the people hear the laws from Moshe, they treat it as though God said it, and not that Moshe made it up. Now, there's something in ancient Near East you have to realize, which is important for the background. there's an ancient law called Hammurabi. You're familiar with it, I'm sure, right? You've heard of King Hammurabi? In the preamble to Hammurabi, God gives King Hammurabi the right to legislate. But legislation is made by King Hammurabi. Understand that preamble? In Hammurabi law code, the right to legislate, the divine right to legislate, was given by God to King Hammurabi, but God does not write the laws. King Hammurabi writes the laws. The right to write the laws, that was wordplay, right? That was the permission, the divine right to be able to make up the laws, that was granted to King Hammurabi by God, and hence their authority. That's very different, where Moshe is simply the middleman that relays the words of God directly to the people. And God wants to make sure that what God says to the people is God talking and not Moshe. And therefore, God wants to talk again to the people through Moshe in a manner so that when Moshe says, here's what God said, they'll believe that's what God said. That's how I understand what God's telling Moshe Rabbeinu. Because I'm going to come to you in the thickness of a cloud. The people over here when I speak to you, and then they'll believe, we don't believe in Moshe. This is the Rambam's principle in the 13 principles, is that Nevuat Moshe, when Moshe says something in the name of God, God really told that to Moshe, and Moshe's not making it up. I think that's what that's referring to. Now I'm stopping here for a minute. Basically, God's planning. He's explaining to Moshe to tell the people how he's going to transmit the commandments or the covenant. Now, what should happen next? The 10 Commandments. But now something really strange happens. Look at the, I call 9 3/4. Vayaged Moshe divrei ha'am Hashem. Moshe told the words of the people to God. Look at this phrase. What's difficult about this phrase? What we just read here. Vayaged Moshe divrei ha'am el Hashem. What's difficult about that? What's missing here? Moshe should be telling the people what God said. Instead, what happens? Moshe tells God what the people said. Anyone have a problem?
He's telling them something we don't know about.
They
obviously had some sort of question.
What did
don't we know?
what did the people say?
That's right. So I call this 9 3/4. Hope you understand my analogy if you read Harry Potter. At Pasuk Tet, 3/4, at 9 3/4, something is missing in the text. Something right here is missing. And what's missing?
It's in Pasuk Zion. Kol asher diber Hashem naaseh. That's what the people said. So that's what Moshe is telling God. Here's what they said.
Okay, that's what Ibn Ezra says, but everyone disagrees with Ibn Ezra because of Pasuk Het. V'yanu kol am yachdav yamru kol asher diber Hashem naaseh. Vayashev Moshe divrei ha'am el Hashem. Moshe already told God. God's not hard of hearing. Moshe already told the people what God said. It was the people's response of accepting the covenant, that was done in Pasuk Het. And now this has to, the people must have said something relating to this plan of transmission, this idea of the cloud. So in Chazal, we're going to see Rashi in a minute. Rashi is going to deal with this, but I want to explain to you how Rashi reaches this conclusion, or the Midrash that Rashi quotes. They play a game which you remember called Jeopardy. There's a game called Jeopardy where you get the answer, but you have to ask what's the question. Like the answer is, you say, 10. Oh, what's 5 times 2? Okay. So here, let's look at God's answer. And based on God's answer, I want you to figure out what did the people ask for? Or where did the people respond? Moshe, God tells Moshe in Pasuk Yud, go to the people, get them ready, and wash their clothes. Why? Be ready for day 3. On day 3, Yered Hashem le'enei kol ha'am al Har Sinai. What's going to happen in 3 days' time? God is going to come down to the eyes of all the people on Har Sinai. Now, I don't think that people asked, do we have to do laundry? I don't think that was a question. Or how many days will this be? What makes more sense? What were the people? If this is God's response, what did it seem the people wanted? What's going to happen in 3 days' time? In 3 days' time, Yered Hashem le'inei kol ha'am al Har Sinai. What's going to be important about that? Or how is that different? How is this different than Pasuk Tet?
So Moshe promised that they'll hear, and here they want to see.
They want to see God. It's not enough. This idea of a cloud, they don't like this idea of a cloud. Instead of a cloud, they want to see God. No, they want a more direct thing. Now, that sounds like a good idea, right? In fact, that would have been a much better idea. If God wants, put it this way, if God wants to make sure that everyone knows that he's talking, what should God do?
Remove the cloud.
Yeah, get rid of who needs a cloud? Who needs the barrier? Just let God speak directly to the people. And God seems, that seems to be what the people must have said, but for some reason the text doesn't say that. The text only, the main part is missing, and we're only told what the people, that Moshe told God what the people said, but we get God's response. But it seems like they're saying, we don't want the cloud, we want to hear God directly. Now, in light of this, I'll simply show you Rashi says exactly that. We'll have here Rashi on Pasuk Tet. What were Divrei Ha'am? Remember? In Pasuk at 9 3/4. Remember, I gave Moshe Divrei Ha'am el Hashem. What are Divrei Ha'am? Rashi explained, Shuval davar zeh shamati mehem. Right? I heard a response from the people about this plan. Shirtzonam lishmo mimcha. We want to hear directly from you. Eine domeh hashomeh mepi shaleach leshomeh mepi hamelech. You can't compare hearing it from a shaleach like Moshe Rabbeinu, hearing it from God himself, or he quotes another Midrash in the Mechelot, we want to see God himself. We don't want the cloud, we want the real thing. Got the idea? Now, it sounds like Rashi's sort of pulling teeth. Rashi's approach is a famous one, but it sounds like he's pulling teeth there, because how does he know the people said that? Rashi's approach is not only based on playing Jeopardy here, but we'll see this idea is going to be through the entire story of Maamad Har Sinai. Where even though God needs to speak to the people, how close will the people be to God? That's going to be the underlying question. Is God going to speak directly to the people? What's called panim b'fanim, face to face with the people? Or is God going to speak through a cloud, to Moshe, through a cloud? And they'll know that God's talking to Moshe, and when Moshe says they'll believe that that's what God said, but a more indirect encounter. Notice, how direct will the encounter be between God and his people? And that's what's being set up here. For the sake of the share, just to clarify, God's original plan of the buffered encounter, I'll call that plan A, and the people requesting for a higher level, from now on plan B. Is that clear? Plan A meaning God's original plan, plan B, the new plan. Now, there's no doubt that plan B is a much higher level, but what's the downside of a direct encounter with God? That in itself, who wants to be so close to God? If you remember like a year ago when people used to go to shul, before all this stuff happened. So almost every shul, anywhere you go, you have to come early to get a back seat. And when shul isn't full, you'll see it's like a crescent. Like you'll see most people sit towards the back. Maybe if you think back and remember what shul is like, there's always a couple of people sitting up front, but most people tend to go to the back. That's a natural phenomena of you want to be close to God, but not too close. It could be, or maybe there might be other psychological reasons. Now, on the one hand, it's really good to want to be close, but it's also who wants to be so close. So let's go now to see what happens next. So if I go back to Perek Yutet, let's see what happens. So basically, God says, if you want to come, if you want to be, so Bnei Yisrael accept the covenant, and then God have plans to how to transmit the laws, and this we call Plan A through Moshe. And then Moshe says, what do you call it? Go get them ready, because on day 3, God will come down on Har Sinai. Now, from what you remember, I'm sorry, before I go any farther, from what you remember, how were the 10 Commandments given? Directly by God, or from or through Moshe?
The first two were given by God.
And the last 8?
Moshe Rabbeinu.
Yeah. Who remembers learning that? Did we all learn that growing up? No. You know, there's 2 sources for that. There's a famous line of Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. Torah in Gematria is, do the math, 611, right? Torah and Gematria 611. So 611 laws were given to us by Moshe, and 2 are given directly by God. So if I follow that Midrashic interpretation, then the first 2 commandments were given plan B directly, while the last 8 were given back to the original plan A. But then why did God switch in the middle? That's really strange. But that's everyone learned in kindergarten. That's already, you know that more than Chumash. Everyone just knows that. And because of that, we get 613. Remember, no one started from scratch and counted 613 laws. You start counting, you can get, if you wanted to get to 500, I get to 500. If I wanted to get to 1,000, I could get to 1,000. But I decided I need 613. It's sort of like a magic number. But because of that, that's all the people counting mitzvot work that way. But let's go back now and try to understand what leads to that conclusion that the first 2 were given directly by God. So let's read this story and see what happened. So let's continue. Go back to my screen, and now it gets complicated. Okay. There's some more laws here. There's 3 days of preparation, but God says, cordon off the mountain, and don't touch the mountain. Anyone touches the mountain is going to die. Basically, God says, in preparation for these 3 days, get some ushers and make sure no one goes near the mountain where the Har Sinai, where the theophany will take place. No one can touch it. And if anyone goes near the mountain, throw a rock at him or shoot an arrow. Why? Because it's dangerous. Got it? But the ushers can't go up the mountain. So basically, it's taking him an animal. No one can go on the mountain. Now listen carefully. Bimshoch hayovel hemu yalu bahar. Bimshoch hayovel means a long shofar blowing. When you hear a long shofar blowing, the people can come up the mountain. Now, is that long shofar blowing? How do you understand this? Is that the opening buzzer or the closing buzzer of Har Sinai? But let me give you my analogy. Just remember this line. I'm going to take off my share screen for a minute. When you hear a long shofar blowing, the people can come up the mountain. Now, does that mean, let's go to basketball. It's basketball season in America. Okay. When the opening buzzer, when the game starts, who's allowed on the play field? Only the players. The spectators are not allowed on the court, and there's ushers to make sure they don't come on. When the game's over, then the people can come on the court. In other words, the kedusha lahavdil, the kedusha of the court is only when the game is being played. So is God saying during the entire theophany of Maamad Har Sinai, is Har Sinai off limits to everyone while God's talking? But when the theophany is over, then it's okay to come up on Har Sinai? Or is God saying in the 3 days of preparation, no one goes near Har Sinai? But when the day comes and it's time for God to say, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I want you to come up Har Sinai. And what's the indicator it's okay to come up and meet God? The long shofar blowing. Understand? So is the long shofar blowing an indicator, game starting or game ending? Now, if God's going to go speak to them directly, it's called panim b'fanim, then it makes sense that this is the opening buzzer. And when you hear the shofar blowing, it's time to meet God because there's 3 days of preparation for the big event. But the big event, we should be on the mountain. If it's plan B, where God's only meeting Moshe on the mountain, then Moshe should be on the mountain for the shofar blowing, but the people should be at the foot, and no one's on the mountain until it's all over. But that's the 2 ways of looking at it. It's a giant machloket among the commentators. But notice again how ambiguous, how unclear the psukim are. So now let's see what happened. Let's go and see what happened, and we'll see if the shofar blowing continues. So sure enough, and then Moshe comes down and tells the people to get ready, okay, and close. And he adds another one. Probably God told him, be ready for 3 days and not to be near your wives. Now, let's see what happens on day 3. Let's make this a little bit bigger because this will be important. It comes on day 3 in the morning. What's that sound like? That's the long shofar blowing we've been waiting for. But what happened? The people should be at the mountain or ready to go up the mountain. And where are the people instead? The people are in the camp. And because of this pasuk, we stay up all night Shavuos night. There's a Midrash that we overslept. Or we got scared, or we set out. And instead of coming to Har Sinai to hear God directly, we all got scared. and we didn't show up. But Moshe got everything ready. So what does Moshe do? Moshe goes back to the camp, says, you asked for this guest speaker. No, you asked to hear God directly. So he brings the people and brings them back to the bottom of the mountain where they should have been beforehand. And we're going to start again. Now God comes down with fire on the entire mountain. Everything, it's this monumental event, everything's shaking. There's noise, there's like a loud shofar blowing, there's thunder and lightning, and everything's trembling. And now we're ready for Anochi Hashem Elokecha. And now we're going to start up again. Remember, the kol shofar was strong. Now, Vayikol shofar holech v'chazek me'od. That seems clearly the Bimshach Yovel. And what should happen at this point? At this point, they should hear the 10 Commandments directly from God. But what happens instead? Moshe yedaber, ve'Elohim yanenu b'kol. That's really strange. What are we told? Moshe would speak, or as Moshe would speak, God would answer him with a voice. What's happening here? You understand? What is Moshe? Who's Moshe talking to? This is present perfect. As Moshe would speak, God would answer him with a voice. It's unclear who's Moshe talking to, and what's God doing, and what's God answering. A giant machloket. Now, what are the two possibilities? Moshe Daber. Moshe could either be talking to God, but what are they talking about? Or Moshe could be talking to the Jewish people. Well, what would he be telling them? So, want to see an amazing Rashi? You've seen this speaking before. Rashi said something out of left field. Listen what Rashi says on Pasuk Yotet. Remember Moshe Daber? Let's look at the Pasuk again. As Moshe would speak, God would answer with a voice. Remember, we're waiting for the 10 Commandments. Listen what Rashi says. Moshe Yedaber, Kshayam Moshe Medaber Umashmiya Dibrot L'Yisrael. As Moshe would say and speak and make the Dibrot heard to Israel, Sharei Lo Shamu Mipiad V'ra Elo Nochi V'lo Yelecha. They only heard from God the first two. So, but Moshe would say the last 8. God would amplify his voice when he spoke the last 8. Realize what Rashi just said? Rashi just said what? Rashi simply said that this pasuk, Moshe Yedaber, if I go back to here, right? This pasuk, Moshe Yedaber, is talking about the last 8 dibrot. And when Moshe spoke the last 8 dibrot, God would help him amplify his voice. God was like a microphone system, like a summit microphone, because it was on Shabbos. So Moshe would speak, but God amplified his voice so everyone could hear him. But who did they hear the dibrot from? From Moshe. That's back to plan. That's back to plan A, the original plan. That Moshe spoke the dibrot, and not God. But according to Rashi, what's missing in Pasuk Yotet? I want to make sure everyone understands. You tell me. I want to make sure you tell me. According to Rashi, Rashi says Pasuk Yotet is the 10 Commandments. But in the narrative, what's missing? According to Rashi, what's missing in the middle of this narrative? God speaking the first 2 with plan B, understand? And then Moshe saying the last 8 with plan A, going back to plan A. You follow what Rashi's doing?
He's skipping the first 2 commandments.
He's skipping the first 2 commandments given by plan B. Now, therefore, tell me if Rashi's correct, what story is missing? What must have happened according to Rashi, what must have happened between commandment 2 and 3?
The verse that says that the people panicked and panicked, as it says right after the Decalogue.
Okay, so the story that's missing in the middle of Pasuk Yotet, according to Rashi, we're going to find after the 10 Commandments in Parachav. So let's take a look at it real fast. I have it in a different format here. Where are my cutouts? Here we go. Look at this page. Let me make it smaller. How are we going to do this? Make it real small. Okay, here's a nice little page. You probably can't read it, but remember, we just getting ready in the preparation, plan A and plan B. Moshe would speak. So what Rashi claims is that in the middle of D, in the middle of Moshe Daber, or in the middle of Pasuk Yetet, first we heard the first two Dibrot directly from God, and then they got scared, and then we heard the last eight from Moshe. Now, when the Dibrot are over, we're going to read this little story. When the Dibrot are over, I'll make it now bigger. I call it Fear Story 1. The story is in Perek Chaf, after Lo Tachmod. Of course, all the Parshanim, except Ebenezer, belongs to earlier. But it's a footnote to the Ten Commandments, and listen what happens. B'chol ha'am ro'im et hakolot et lapidim. The people see all the all the theatrics. And what did they say? Vayamru Moshe. I'm sorry. They held the kol shafar v'chazak mod. Okay. The people see and they move and they stand from a distance. Vayamru Moshe. And this, in my opinion, is the main source of Rashi back in Perek Yutet. What did the people tell Moshe? Daber atay manu v'nishma'a v'al yedaber imanu Elohim pen namut. We want you to speak to us, and we'll listen to whatever you say. We don't want God to speak to us because we're going to die. That's the story that we're looking for, isn't it? Now, this conversation proves plan A and plan B, doesn't it? What Rashi was saying in Perek Yutet about the people asking to hear God directly, you see that must have been a possibility in this story. Because the people tell Moshe, we don't want to hear God speaking to us. We want to hear from you. Because it's too intense for us, we're going to die. Shemot tells him, don't be fearful. It's for your good. The people stay at a distance. And Moshe goes into the Arafel where God is. No, that's for sure plan A. Where Moshe goes into the cloud. And he'll hear directly from God and the people stand at a distance. Here we return to plan A. So this is a story that, if I make this smaller now, according to Rashi, this story happens in the middle of Pasuk Yotet, and more than that, what Rashi is basically saying is that. I hope you see my screen, okay? He takes the story H and puts it between F and G. Understand? Okay, wait a second. Let me just put a quick mute here. Already. Now, back to my screen. If I take 1 second. Mute. How come we didn't mute? Okay, that should do it now. Okay, sorry about that. According to Rashi, what's happening? God spoke in the middle of Pasuk Yutet, in D. In the middle are blowing, which means we're beginning. God spoke to the people directly. The people got, and then Moshe tells the people the last 8. Understand how confusing it is? Hope that's clear from this thing. It looks complicated, but that's what Rashi is saying. Now, if you look at the 10 Commandments, what's the source, other than your kindergarten teacher who told you that? Is there a source that would make a good reason why the first 2 are given by Plan B directly and the last 8 from Moshe? What is it about the 10 Commandments that leads to that? That I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. Take a look at the 2 Commandments. What person are they written in?
First person.
Aren't they written in first person? Onochi Hashem Elokecha. Okay. Lo yelchalchim al panai. Lo taset tmunat, etc. Lo tivram lotem ki onochi Hashem Elokecha el kana. Poken avot abret nesonai. Osekesed lavim lo ahavai l'shomrei mitzvotai. Here, God is speaking in first person, just like He was in the proposition we saw before. God is speaking here in first person to the people. That's clear. Now, in the last 8, as soon as we start commandment number 3, Lo tisad shem Hashem Elokecha lashav, that's something else already, isn't it? Here, we're talking about God in the third person. Shabbat l'Hashem Elokecha. And Laman kabet tavicha Laman adama Hashem Elokecha noten lach. That's third person. Is that clear? So because of the change in person between the first 2 and the last 8, that's going to be the basis that leads Chazal to say the first 2 were given directly by God, Because if they hear plan B directly from God, it makes sense God will be speaking in first person. If God talked to Moshe and Moshe relayed the Dibrot, it makes sense that Moshe is telling the people, talking about God in third person. And if I follow Chazal, then if I go back and make this small, basically what does Chazal say? In a nutshell, if I look at this page I'm showing you, Chazal basically say that we go A, B, C, and then in the middle of D, I have F, G, F, H, and G. Got it? In the middle of Pasuk Tet, what happens? It's F, H, and G go together, but F in that order, F, H, then G, because H is a footnote to what happened between F and G, because God doesn't want to break up the Dibrot. And it all takes place in the middle of Pasuk Yotet, which sounds like really strange, right? But that's what you learned in kindergarten. That's Shitat Chazal. Now, if I follow Rashi, something really amazing happens. What happens? There's a fancy word in English called obfuscation. Anyone ever heard that word before? Who said the word to obfuscate? Obfuscate is to hide something, but it's different than hiding. When you obfuscate something, you're hiding it because you want someone to look for it. Understand the difference? If I'm hiding a good chocolate bar that I got for Shalach Monas, right? So I'm going to hide it in my desk drawer because I don't want anyone else to find it. Right? If I have an engagement ring, got it? And I want to make it like something exciting, I'm going to hide it because I want the kala to find it. Yeah, understand the difference between the two? Or if I'm giving a present to a child, instead of giving the present, I'm going to hide it somewhere and give him hints till he finds it. So when you obfuscate something, you're hiding it in order that someone finds it, not to hide it forever. If I'm giving Shah Megillat Esther, I'd show the same thing. Remember, God is hidden in Megillat Esther, but the author wants the reader to find God, but he's hiding God so that the reader will find him through careful study. Got it? Because that's a lesson about, that's how we find God in history. You don't see God, but you perceive God. So what I'm trying to explain is, the way Chazal, I'm following Rashi again, understand Perek Yotet, plan B happened, but it's obfuscated. Where was it obfuscated? The people's request for plan B is only alluded to in Pasuk Tet, and plan B happening is totally missing in Pasuk Yotet. Now, I could figure out that plan B happened when I read the whole unit and I analyze it, when I study the unit. If I do my objective analysis and study the unit, it makes sense to reach that conclusion. But what did Chumash want the reader to do? The reader what Chumash wants the reader to uncover plan B on his own. I hope that point's coming. I'm going to repeat it because it's the main point of my share. What I'm trying to explain to you, why, if Rashi is correct, and Rashi is not just Rashi, Rashi is quoting Chazal, and your kindergarten teacher, then why does Chumash purposely leave out the most important psukim in the narrative? The people's request, we want to see God. And the people actually hearing the first two from God, why is that missing in the narrative in Perek Yotet? So what I want to suggest is let me go to the three stages. Right? When I read it objectively, something's missing in the text, that's for sure. When I study the text carefully, I can easily reach the conclusion that what's missing in the text was the people requesting for plan B and actually hearing the Ten Commandments directly from God in Pasuk Yotet by plan B, at least the first two. So that might be a good conclusion, but the question is, why does Chumash write that way? So I did my detective work. Why did Chumash make it so that I only find plan B through careful study? So what I call here the message is a medium, meaning because the idea of plan B, which is a super high level of closest to God, it's something. The way Chumash hides it is the essence of the message of religion that you only find God if you look for Him. In other words, if you're looking for a close relationship with God, it'll only come if you search for God. Now that sounds more like a Shalashudis Rasha or a rabbi speech, which I'm admitting I'm not sure if it's proud of Chumash. I'm just adding that's what my little add-on. I did the objective analysis. I try to explain to you why Rashi and Chazal say what they say. I want to add my own insight of why I think Chumash writes that way. What's the purpose? I proved to you that that Chumash is obfuscating something that I can prove that must have happened. But only through careful study do I find what must have happened. So I'm saying Chumash writes in a way that the only way you'll find it is through careful study. But that might relate to the essence of a religious experience of an encounter with God. You only have a close encounter with God if you look for that encounter. Or what I'd like to say is the punishment for not being spiritual is not being spiritual. If you're not interested in spirituality, you won't find it. That's it's not a punishment, it's a consequence. But that's for Shiva Boker. Now back to Chumash. What's going to confuse things even more now is going to be the rest of Perek Yotet. That's one point. Now I want to get to another thing that you're all familiar with, but also confuses everyone when you study Parsha Yitro. If I go back to Perek Yotet, where you were before, and continue. So let's say Rashi's right, this was the Ten Commandments. What's happening now in Pasach Chav? So Ramban's going to say, Ramban will totally disagree with everything we did. Ramban's going to give a different reason for first person and third person. Ramban's going to say the first two are first person because they're cardinal. They're the main things, and the last eight are less important. And many times God changes from first person to third person when he speaks. Brings lots of examples of that. And therefore, he doesn't say that story happened afterwards, in the middle. He has a totally different approach. And Moshe speaking here is not the last eight, but Moshe speaking here, this Pasuk Yotet is introducing this conversation in the next 5 psukim. So let's see what happened. Maamad Har Sinai, a Rosh Har. Even though God was on the mountain, now God comes down to the top of the mountain, and he calls Moshe and tells Moshe, come up the mountain. And Moshe comes up. God, even though he's on the mountain, now God limits himself to the top of the mountain and calls Moshe to come up. Listen carefully. Moshe, go down and warn the people. No one can look. Now, God tells Moshe, go down, warn the people, no peeking. Almost like Birkas Kohanim. No looking at the Shekhinah. And don't you dare look, because if anyone looks, they're going to die. Right? Now, that's negating plan B altogether, isn't it? If we thought there was a plan B, that you could see God, remember we said before, Yered Hashem Leinei Kol Maamad Har Sinai? If God's going to come in front of the eyes of the people, if that was what the people asked for, and that's what God said be ready for, by the time you get here, forget it. Got it? God telling Moshe Rabbeinu, there's no way they'll die. Pasuk Chabet is the most confusing. Listen to Pasuk Chabet. V'gam ha'kohanim hanigashim el Hashem yitkadashu. Even the priests who come closer to God, but have to separate themselves. Penny frost by Hashem. Even they have to be careful, I guess, not to look. Who are these people? We've never heard of Kohanim yet in Chumash, have we? We don't know who they are. Now, but the verses sound like we know who they are. There's a group of people who came closer to God, and they have to be careful, as well as the people, but the reader has no idea who these people are. Now, Moshe's response is even more strange. Moshe tells God, don't worry about it. Lo yuchalam la'alot har Sinai. Don't worry about it. They know not to come up because you warned us. You told us to be prepared. Don't come close. And God tells Moshe, no, go warn them. Hashem lech reid. Go down. Only you and Aaron can come up. Va'kohanim va'am. The Kohanim and the people, they can't dare go up to see God. They can't go up to God lest they be smitten. And therefore, what's Moshe do? Moshe goes down and tells the people what? Not to come up. But now, there's no doubt that there's no more plan B. Got it? And that's why Rashi Bim Shochei Ovel is going to be when it's over. When God's on the mountain, there's no way anyone can get that close to God. God's going to come on the mountain and say the Dibrot, but no one can be anywhere near, no one can look. That's why I call this limitation. Now, a lot of people think Moshe comes and tells the people the 10 commandments, but all the Parshim say Moshe comes down and warns them not to say them, not to look up. And now we get the 10 commandments. And if you look, let's go back to the 10 commandments on my other sheet over here. And the 10 commandments, what happens? Look at the first line, which is rather interesting. If we want to find out whether God said them or Moshe said them, let's just look at the first line of the Ten Commandments. What does it say? It says, "Vaydaber Elohim et hadvarim ha'ele lemor." What's missing in Pasuk Aleph? The subject. Who did God say these things to? Usually it says, "Vaydaber Elohim el Moshe lemor." Or Alam. Here's "Vaydaber Elohim et hadvarim ha'ele lemor." It doesn't say who they were speaking them to. So again, what's unclear? Was God speaking directly to the people or through Moshe? So the ambiguity is consistent in the Ten Commandments as well. And then we have the Ten Commandments. Now, real quickly, I want to show you something. Let me explain who these Kohanim are. And you'll go back to something you learned in kindergarten. We're going to go now to back to Chumash, and we're going to go now to Perach Havdalad in Shmot. We'll say for Shmot, Perach Havdalad. We don't have time to do this properly, but we'll do it quickly. There's a story after Parshat Mishpatim, which is sort of in past perfect. When the Ten Commandments are over and all Parshat Mishpatim is over, we're going to have a ceremony, okay? Which some people say that you were there. What's in the ceremony? Where are we? Here we go. Make this a little bit bigger. Here. Ve'el Moshe Amar. God had told Moshe, "Alei el Hashem ata ba'aron nadav avihu v'shivim mizinei Yisrael b'shtachavitim merachok." God had told Moshe, this is past perfect, come up to the mountain of God, you and Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, and 70 elders, and bow down from a distance. Well, what do we find out about? Here's a group of Kohanim who come up closer to God, correct? And then afterwards, only Moshe will go up by himself, and the elders, won't go up, and the people don't come up at all. What do we see in these two psukim? We have three groups of people. There's Moshe or Moshe and Aaron, who go all the way up. We have the Kohanim, Nadav, Avihu, and 70 elders, who come up closer and bow down to God, and the people farther away. Now, then it says, but then Vayavo Moshe, Vayisaper lam et kol divrei Hashem. Moshe came and told the people all the words of God in the Mishpatim, and all the people answered, Kol divrei diber Hashem naseh. The simplest understanding is these are the laws of Parshat Mishpatim. But Rashi would disagree. Moshe writes all the words of God. What are divrei Hashem? We'll talk about soon. He gets up in the morning, he builds a Mizbeach and 12 monuments. If there's a Mizbeach, it means there's going to be a cookout. There's a ceremony coming up. He sends Nabrai B'nai Yisrael and they bring Olot and Shlamim. Shlamim means there's a cookout, there's a barbecue, people are going to eat. We're going to join in a meal with God. Moshe takes half the blood and puts it in big containers. And famous 24/7, Vaikach Sefer HaBrit, whatever that is, Vaikrobos and Moshe, after offering all these sacrifices and collecting all the blood, he reads out loud some covenantal book, so the people hear it, and the people answer, everything that God says or will say, we're going to listen and keep. And then Moshe takes the blood and sprinkles it on the people, and says, this blood is symbolic of this covenant that we're making. And then Moshe, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and 70 others go up the mountain, like I told them to bow down from a distance. And they see God. See that? That doesn't mean they forget. They saw God. And the bottom of God's feet was like the brightest thing anyone ever saw. Of course, God doesn't have feet, but it's anthropomorphism. It's like the lowest level of God was the brightest thing they could see. And it was fine. These nobles, no, nothing happened to them. God didn't punish them. They envisioned God and they ate and they drank. Like Hasidim. Right? That was the closest to God was expressed through the eating and drinking of the korbanot. And they saw God, and this was like a great event. Now, what did everyone learn in kindergarten? When did this story happen? When did we say Nasa v'nishma? What did you learn?
Before Har Sinai.
They got the Ten Commandments.
Before you were born, everyone learned that we said Nasa v'nishma before we got the Ten Commandments, which means at Shitat Rashi for sure, Rashi on the spot. Means what does Rashi do? He takes this story at Perach Havdalah, I'll call it the Nasa v'nishma, the Brit Nasa v'nishma, and where does he put it? Let's look carefully now. If I follow Rashi, Rashi takes the story we just read, And where's he put it on my chart over here? If it's before Maamad Har Sinai, okay, it's not before A. First, there's the proposition. You want to be my people, and then there's the prep. Then there's the different plans of how to prepare to be ready. So it can't be before A and B, but it's got to be before C. It's got to be before they get the Torah. So Rashi puts, according to Rashi and Chazal and your kindergarten teacher, Morachan, whoever it was, they put Perach Avdalad, those 11 psukim, that ceremony, and they put it right here. They put it right over here. Sorry, they put it right here. Here it is. Okay, that's where they put it, right here. Now, if that's true, then it fits Plan B, because this leadership group saw God, and that prepared them for seeing God. And in this little ceremony, at least some of the people, the elder group, were able to see God, and it was okay. Then comes day 3, and they're ready for the big event. It was first, what's happening basically in A, we're getting engaged in a private conversation. Now we need an engagement party. Perach Avdallah, that's the engagement party with the ceremony. What we said here, when we made that proposition, we said everything God said we're going to keep. So we did that quickly. That was like getting engaged. Now we need an engagement party, and between our acceptance of it in principle and actually here getting the contract directly from God and C and at Maamad Har Sinai, we have during the 3 days of preparation a ceremony, an engagement party, where there's food and there's a ceremony, and our leadership accepts the award on behalf of the people, and there's korbanot, there's a cookout, and there's everyone gets sprinkled with blood upon them, and all in preparation for the big event. Now, what leads Chazal to that? What I want to suggest is, if that story that we just read in Perach Avdalad happened here between B and C, it explains the limitation psukim. Because what was bothering us about these psukim at the end? And these psukim, what do we say? God tells Moshe, go down and warn the people. No, if this is happening right before the Dibrot on day 3. Remember how day 3 began? The people got ready, go up the mountain, get ready, and but the people get scared, and they tell Moshe, we don't want to come, and then then everyone gets scared. It could be that because they got so scared, God says, you know what, they're not capable, they're not on the level to hear God directly, and we have to nix Plan B and go back to Plan A. In fact, if I follow one last thing real fast, if I follow Ramban does something even better. Ramban says that this story here that Chazal put between the first and last 8 of getting scared, Ramban puts a story here together with C. He says these 2 stories are too similar. It is when the people got scared on day 3, they told Moshe, we don't want Plan B anymore. We want to go back to Plan A. At the last minute, they chicken out. But if so, or either way, let's take a look. If I go back to here, if Perach Avdalad happened already, and that leadership group already came up the mountain and saw God, before the 10 Commandments, God realizes that people, there's no way they're on that level. And therefore, God tells Moshe Rabbeinu to go down and warn the people not to look. And even the Kohanim who already came close to God yesterday or the day before in that ceremony, they have to be careful also. I let them get away with it the first time, but it's not going to happen again. Now, why might the people say it's okay? Hey, if they got to go, if the Kohanim got permission, why can't we have permission? And therefore, God now, it says the last minute, no, it's too dangerous. Plan B is too dangerous. Everyone keep your distance. And therefore, God tells Moshe, go warn them. Only you and Aaron can come up. The Kohanim and Am can't come up because they'll be smoten. And at the last minute, we're going to nix Plan B. Now, if this is happening before the 10 Commandments or between the 2nd and the 3rd, you could argue. But this story as well is I would put it this way. This story, if I want to divide it up nicely, this story here in H is the people not wanting Plan B, and this story here in E is God not wanting Plan B. The Plan B, they're not ready for it yet. Plan B might have been a nice thing, but if you're not on the level of Plan B, you can't have it. Now, I want to bring one other source to prove my point about how ambiguous the story is. because there's another story about the 10 Commandments in Sefer Devarim in Parshat V'etchanan. If I go to my Chumash and go to Sefer Devarim Perek Hey and look at the parallel story of the 10 Commandments, it's the beginning of Moshe's big speech in Sefer Devarim. So Moshe calls all of Israel together and tells them, listen to all these laws I'm teaching you. Listen carefully to Pasuk Bet. Hashem Elokeinu kratim anu brit b'chorev. We made a covenant with God at Har Sinai. That's a covenant we just talked about, to be God's people forever. And it wasn't only with your parents, Moshe says to people in the 40th year. It was you. You were all there. Now, look at Pasuk Daled. Panim b'fanim diber Hashem imachem b'har mitoch ha'esh. God spoke to you face to face. That's plan B, isn't it? God spoke to you directly at Har Sinai, which implies plan B. So that's the proof that plan B happened. Until you read Pasuk Hey. Onochi omeid bein Hashem u'beinechem Beit Hai. I was the middleman between you and God at that time to tell them, like Yidlechem et Dvar Hashem. I had to become the middleman, plan A. Why? Ki yiretem b'pnei ha'esh v'lo yitem b'har lemor. Because you became scared of the fire and you didn't come up the mountain. That proves that coming up the mountain, they should have come up the mountain had they been worthy. Now, is Pasuk Daled what should have happened? And Pasuk Hey what ended up happening? And there's all those, Panim Fanim was God's plan, that was plan B that should have happened. But the people got scared and therefore I became the middleman and it never happened. And I became the middleman for the 10 Commandments. Or is Panim B'Fanim how the 10 Commandments were given? And Pasuk Hey is what's going to happen after the 10 Commandments? Or is Panim B'Fanim what happened for the first 2? And this happened for the last 8? It can go either way, but what do you see again? That is intentionally unclear how we got the 10 Commandments. You see the intentional ambiguity between these two psukim? This shows you again, there was a concept of plan B, of a direct communication with God. In reality, we went to plan A through Moshe Rabbeinu. But what really happened, that was on our title, right? It's totally unclear. But why it's totally unclear, I think, is the key message of Chumash. Not the key message, it's maybe an underlying message of Chumash. That the lack of clarity, the fact that we set up these two sort of opposite ideas, that on the one hand, we want to be as close as possible to God. On the other hand, how can we possibly be so close to God? That dialectic is built into the whole experience of Har Sinai, which is an eternal experience of all the time. And I think that's why Chumash does that. The intentional ambiguity is not just in Shemot, it's also in Devarim. It's reflected all through Devarim. And it's because of that ambiguity, we'll find such a wide range of opinions in the Parshanim. I'll give one other example at the end. For example, where do we put this story, this fear story H? According to Rashi, remember, we put H. This little fear story here, H. According to Rashi, we put H between F and G. According to Ramban, we put H together C before the 10 Commandments. According to Ibn Ezra, we leave it where it is. It's all because of his parallel story in Devarim. It's too complicated for today's year. But there's so many different opinions. Bimshoch hayovel, is that supposed to be Hemiyalu Bahar? Is that before the opening buzzer, closing buzzer? Massive machloket. Right? Why first person and third person? Massive machloket for the reason for that. Now, again, my point is the arguments is what God wanted to happen. The fact there's so many arguments about what happened proves to me that Chumash is intentionally unclear, because I'm not going to say Chumash is poorly written. Chumash is beautifully written. My point is the fact that there's so many different opinions as to what really happened at Har Sinai indicates that Chumash is intentionally unclear about the order of events and what is happening. But what I want to suggest in this year is the reason for the lack of clarity might be the underlying message that it could be that we were super close to God, or we could have been that close to God, but you can only get close to God if you look for him. It takes effort and trial and desire, and that's the religious experience through life in general. Okay, I'll stop here because it's exactly 11:45. That usually doesn't happen, but I'll stay now for questions.
Yeah, I have a question. If
I'm sorry for apologizing. No Zionism in today's share. So sorry about that, even though it's Mizrahi. Okay, Harold, it's okay?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, look, if the Na'aseh Nishma occurs where, let's say you said Rashi would want to put that,
That's just
Nevertheless,
Rashi. You learned that in kindergarten.
right, but
Hannah
exactly.
taught you that.
Okay, but nevertheless, it's pretty clear from the psukim that the statement "Na'aseh v'nishma" did not occur until after Moshe Rabbeinu read them from the Sefer HaBrit, and in other words, they were fully aware of all of the terms of the covenant when they said "Na'aseh v'nishma." So why is it that that idea, though, that's kind of forgotten, the fact that they knew everything, but
No, according to Rashi, you know what Sefer HaBrit is? Sefer HaBrit is Sefer Breshit.
okay.
Now, I think what I think Rashi is saying is the Brit, Sefer HaBrit, I think is im Shemot Yishvu B'Kol Yushmartem Et Briti. So I think Sefer HaBrit, at the simplest level of shot, Sefer HaBrit was the proposition that they make it formal and say Na'aseh v'nishma to. But Rashi claims that during those 3 days of preparation, they studied Sefer Breshit, which is a book about why they were chosen, who the God is. Before we enter a covenant, we need to know who God is. And therefore, what's Sefer Breshit about? Oh, who's God? Who's this God of creation? Who's this Hashem Echad? What's his concept of man? What's his concept of nations? How come, why did God pick Avram Avinu? How come we're 12 tribes? How come we went down to Egypt? How come we got out of Egypt? How come God did all these miracles? What's the purpose of being chosen? So I see Sefer Breshit as a book written whose original audience was a nation that just experienced oppression, slavery, redemption, and got to Har Sinai, got it? They've been on this roller coaster. And after all those experiences, now they're going to have a 3-day seminar of where they're coming from and where they're going to and what they're all about. And when you kick that mind when you read Sefer Breshit, it changes how you read the book totally. It solves tons of problems in the book and makes so much sense once you read it that way. So the Sefer HaBrit is not going to be the laws of Parshat Mishpatim. Rashi is the Mishpatim, or the laws of being careful, being around the mountain. All the laws that Moshe just had, just told them in that B section, and Hibata Ta'ar, and don't touch this and don't do that. The laws of the 3 days of Hagbalah, he says, are the Mishpatim. He says the Mishpatim, it's not Parshat Mishpatim. Rashi says Parshat Mishpatim was given later.
Okay.
Yeah. But Rashi Shita is amazing, but I think it's very deep.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Now, again, I guess in conclusion, I want to show you that the story, Maamad Har Sinai is so central to our Judaism, isn't it? Probably the most important event, aside from the founding of the State of Israel, and the chibur between Beit Yehudi and I'm just joking. It's an important event about Maamad Har Sinai, but it's written in a way which I think is intentionally ambiguous. But I think behind that ambiguity is a great message, but it's really difficult to understand. But if you don't study the sources, you can't appreciate all the Midrashim that you're so familiar with. And all these arguments which all the commentators have, they're not just arguments over what really happened. Right? They just reflect, like I call it like a hologram, where both could be happening at the same time. There's the value of one happening and the other happening, and they both happen in a similar way. In a like the fact that two things are happening at the same time, like Zachar v'Shamar b'dibur echad kind of idea. There's something special about this dialectic at Har Sinai, which is critical to understanding a religious experience. Okay, yeah. Phil, question. Go ahead, Phil.
You're on mute, Phil. Unmute.
The premise is historically that God dictated the story in this fashion.
Mm-hmm. God told Moshe to write it this way. Otherwise, Moshe would have failed composition. Only God could have written something that's so confusing. And any composition, any teacher would take a composition like this, say unclear, missing words here, missing that. You follow? You can get away with pasuk tet, there's too many psukim you couldn't get away with. There's too much lack of clarity in the verses. Only God could write something so unclear.
That's reasonable.
Yeah. That's Rabbi Breuer's whole approach about the.
It's so not understandable in a direct way that it can only be godly.
Yeah.
This is the story of the Jewish people.
Yeah, and it's through it forces you to study. That's the second message. That the Torah is a book to study and not read, because no way you can read it. Like this doesn't happen when you study Shulchan Aruch. This doesn't happen. The printer made a mistake and left a word out. You follow? You know,
Moshe Rabbeinu
doesn't purposely make something ambiguous.
But Moshe Rabbeinu was the scribe,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, but God told Moshe to write it this way.
Yeah.
And God even writes for us. God tells Moshe how to write Moshe's complaints. In other words, when Moshe talks to God, God tells Moshe how to write down his complaint.
Yeah. So we know now who to blame.
Yeah, we have. That's what's so good about God. We have someone to blame for our problems.
That's what I mean. Thank you.
It's much easier than blaming ourselves. That'd be too much to expect from people to take responsibility.
It's very demanding.
Barish with Adam Arishon. Don't blame me. Your fault. You gave me that wife. Remember the first story in Chumash? That's what's so nice about it.
I wonder what this type of shot has an effect on our Haredi friends.
You're opening up a Pandora's box.
What? Sorry?
That's opening up a Pandora's box, especially nowadays. What we see, it's a totally different understanding of Judaism. There's a fundamental, even though we have a common acceptance of halacha, but our hashkafic understanding of the ways of God and how to read Chumash and stuff, they're fundamentally different. And those fundamental differences lead to totally different types of behavior. Yeah, but that's a long discussion, which I wish I had an answer for.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure. Okay, everyone have a good week and stay healthy. I guess we're all past second vaccination. Most of this group, yeah.
Thank you very much.
But it's going to take a while till we meet in person again. Alrighty. But enjoy and have a good Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.
Sure. How do you close this and close it? Okay, bye-bye.